Some new revelations and a fun new character. Let's talk about the Changeling Season 1, Episode 6, Aftermath. Hey everyone, it's David Stark from Watcher Pass, and it's Friday, which means it's another episode of The Changeling. Let's talk about Season 1, Episode 6, Aftermath, which comes to Apple TV Plus on September 29th, 2023. This one is an interesting episode because it doesn't kind of directly follow the events of Season 1, Episode 5, which had some pretty big kind of revelatory events. This one is kind of a foundation episode. It kind of goes back and looks at what happened to Emma in the time after that whole incident and how she came to the island and how she kind of learned more about what was going on. It is an interesting episode. It's a well done episode. My hot take, though, is I think you should rent it. Look, it's not as good as the other episodes. It's not as strong as the past episodes of The Change. And this is the first one where I didn't absolutely love it the entire way through. But there is enough here to make for an interesting episode. It has some really important revelations. It has a fun new character and a fun new kind of environment to look at. But overall, I think it's a kind of weaker episode than we have grown used to. Maybe that's because episode 5 was so good. It had such an interesting, sinister story and a really big revelation at the end. This one just couldn't match that. So overall, I thought it was a weaker episode, but it is still pretty good. That being said, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the episode, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and then really quickly go into a recap. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in the recap section. If you don't want to know what happens in this episode, I would turn it off when I get there. Before that, I'll keep it vague. I'll keep it spoiler free. I'll let you know when I get to those spoilers. So in The Changeling Season 1, Episode 6, like I said, you find out what happened to Emma after the whole incident at the apartment with Apollo and Brian. You see her kind of flee the apartment and make her way to this island. And you find out some more things about how she got to the island, what she did while she was there, and how she planned her next steps and what she would do next. And along the way, we get some interesting revelations about what happened to Brian, about what she saw, and also we get to meet a fun new character and an interesting new kind of environment to explore. So things I liked about this episode. The first, look, I love that there's more revelations. I would hope that there would be more revelations, but there are some pretty interesting ones in this episode. We find out again what happened to Emma after the whole incident with Brian and Apollo. We find out kind of her time on the island and the things that were said to her to kind of like help her to grow from this experience, to help her to like move on from this experience and start planning what she was going to do next. The second thing I love the new character. There's a fun new character that we get introduced to There's a fun new character that we get introduced to towards the end of the episode. I really liked him. He was a lot of fun. He was a kind of a quirky, interesting character. Before that, I was a little bit bored with this episode, but once he was introduced, I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. This is fun. I'm curious where it's going to go. Kind of directly tied to that, we also get a new location. This place where this character lives. It's not your normal, typical New York area, and it's not your normal, typical New York area, and it was really fun to see. It had a different aesthetic than we'd seen before, a little bit brighter, a little bit more whimsical. This whole kind of like section of the show is a little bit more whimsical, even though it's still dealing with a pretty kind of serious overall subject matter. It provides a nice kind of moment of levity to break up the serious parts of Changeling at the start and towards the end. And the last thing I love the writing. There are some pretty good lines throughout, but there was just a fantastic exchange towards the end that really kind of tied this episode together. So I'm going to go into that in the recap. I'm not going to say it right now, but overall, look, I've liked the writing in The Changeling through and through, and this episode is no different. So all that being said, I said it was kind of a rental. I said it was a weaker episode. Things I didn't love as much. The first, I'll just call it like, I don't know, some silly crises. There are some incidents here that Emma has to overcome that feel like they are just kind of thrown in for additional kind of drama. And they seem kind of ridiculous when they happen. It's a little bit silly overall, and it doesn't really meaningfully contribute to either your empathy for Emma or the story overall. So it just feels like they were thrown in there to like have some aha moments that don't really contribute much to the overall story. The second thing I didn't love as much, it's a pretty slow start to this episode. Like I said, I didn't really love it until kind of when we get introduced to this new character and this new location, which is on the tail end of the episode overall. But before that, it was pretty slow overall. And The Changeling is not like a super fast-paced show, but again, I was just so intrigued by episode 5. I think nothing could live up to episode 5, so episode 6 was slow by comparison. And the last thing I didn't love as much, there's some pretty poor CG in this episode, and that is something that The Changeling has not really done much. They haven't done a ton of CG throughout. This had some pretty noticeable effects. Thankfully, it's not a lot, but when you do see it, it just looks off. It doesn't look right. There are kind of two main scenes that have very noticeable CG, and they both kind of are weaker because of it. So That being said, The Changeling is still a really good series. It's still a really good overall experience. So definitely check it out. This I think is a weaker episode. It's not a watch like I've given the other episodes of The Changeling, but it's still a decent episode. You're still going to want to watch it because there are 2 episodes left of The Changeling, and you're going to want to catch up to see what happens next, to see where this series goes. So that is The Changeling season 1, episode 6. It comes to Apple TV Plus on September 29th, 2023. Definitely check it out so you can stay up on The Changeling. And I'm going to go into a recap now. So if you don't want to know what happens in this episode, I would turn it off because there are spoilers. So this deals with Emma and her time after the whole incident. You get to see what she saw when she, killed Brian, whatever you want, when she kind of like got rid of this thing that was impersonating Brian. In the crib, she saw some dirt and a stick. And so she takes the stick and holds on to that as a clue for Brian. But then she leaves pretty quickly because she kind of, she assaulted Apollo. She did something to her child. She's got to get moving. She wants to get to this island. So she escapes pretty quickly and heads to the ferry going to Ellis Island. Now, while she's on there, you see someone pursuing her, and it ends up being Kim, her sister. And at first you're like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen? But you find out that Kim knew about what Emma was going through. She kind of like talks to her about how like she has to see her plan through, how, they told her that this was the only way. And also Emma tries to get Kim to come with her to the island. And Kim is like, no, they said you had to come alone. And that's when Kim throws her off the ferry, I guess with the hopes that she would eventually make it to the island. Spoiler, you know this already. She does make it to the island. There's a boat that picks her up and takes her to the island where she sees Cal and all the other parents who had kids that were, I guess, swapped by these changelings, fairies, whatever you want to call it, and sent to this island. Now, when she gets there, Emma is not in a very good place. She hasn't slept very much. She just did something very emotionally draining. She is just wild and angry, and Cal has to sedate her for a bit to kind of like let her rest and let her kind of come back to her senses. Now, when she does, she starts to explore the island, but pretty quickly just kind of wants to escape. Emma wants to escape to find Brian, but what Cal tells her is that, that is essentially a fool's quest. None of the parents who are in this island have ever found their children, and they have all looked. Like some of them looked their entire lives. They've never found their children, and so she doesn't think that Emma is going to be able to. But Emma says, but wait, my husband is still alive. He'll come for me. And Cal's like, good luck. Like, no one short of a god could find this place, which was a fun little like callback. It did feel like a pretty corny line, but I do like that it kind of connected to previous things where Apollo has called himself, the god Apollo. So that was a little clever line. And we do find out Apollo did find the island later. So I guess it was true. Now, Emma is still determined to leave the island. And one of the people that she meets on the island helpfully tells her where the boat is for her to leave. Now, Emma is able to break into this like boat shack, break the lock, get the boat into the water. But when she does, I guess she's a little too exuberant because she like pushes the boat into the water. It goes a little too far and she has to like go and get it. And she's wearing this heavy coat. She has to like swim out to the boat. And while she's swimming, she just gets like overwhelmed, even though the boat doesn't go very far. And even though she's not in the water for very long, she just gets overwhelmed and starts to sink. And this is one of those things where I was like, this feels like a fake manufactured crisis. So she sinks for a little bit, and then she starts thinking about Apollo and her life. This wakes her up, and this causes her to like reach up and grab this rope that was right there. It was like right within her grip. She pulls herself up, gets onto the boat, and is good to go. Where does she go? Well, she goes to New York. She is literally right next to New York because this island is in this river that is on the east side of New York, and you can clearly see the city from the island. She heads into New York and goes to the library that she used to work at. I guess technically probably still does, but the library that she used to work at, and there starts grabbing some books. Now she grabs some books for the kids because she notices that there's kids on this island. Their library is very sad. So she grabs some kids' books, but she also gets some books for herself. She grabs that book that Apollo was obsessed with. I think it was called like To the Waters and the Wilds. And she also grabs a book on like trees because she really wants to figure out like what this branch was and how that can relate to where Brian is. Now, when Emma gets back, she does return. She brings the books. She asks her friend who told her about the boat, like, if she ever saw anything weird in her kids like bed or crib. And her friend says, yes, like there was soil occasionally in the bed. And then at one point there was one leaf, and kind of like this, not like this leaf, but a leaf. Those are those things that are outside. Her friend doesn't have the leaf, but she offers to draw it for her. So now Emma has a leaf and a branch, and she's hoping that she can make that connection. She tries to figure out what plant this is on the island. So as she's walking around, she's trying to match this plant to the various foliage on the island. And at one point, she just like lays down, tired, and a little leaf floats onto her. And this was a clearly CG leaf. It did not look very good. And also, this was one of those like super fortuitous moments because she just lies down and the exact leaf that she's looking for comes down and like lands on her face. She picks it up. There's a leaf. She compares it to the picture and she looks up and there is this giant tree. She matches it in the book and it is a Norway maple. So now she realizes, okay, there's a Norway maple. Now she has to figure out where they are. So she needs to go back to the city to use the internet. Cal says, you know what, the old route that you took is too dangerous. I'm going to give you a new route. So rather than like the old route where she just basically rode to shore, went to the library, did her thing, came out, rode back, seemed pretty quick and painless. Cal gives her a new route. And this involves her like going to meet up with these people. I don't know how they were able to coordinate this meetup because Cal also says that there's no communications on the island. That's why she has to go to the mainland to use the internet. I don't know how Cal communicated this, but she sends Emma in this boat to these people. They pick her up when she lands and they take her into this like underground tunnel to where we meet this person named Wheels, who this was a really fun character. So I'm not like too upset that they had to go this really weird circuitous route to get to the back to the library. But it was a little strange that she had to do this kind of very roundabout route when before she just basically went straight through and was fine. But we get to meet Wheels. He is a fun, quirky character. He is part of like, I guess the mole people, you know, all the mole people that you hear about in like stories about people that are living underground. Well, Wheels is essentially that. He's not like he doesn't look like a mole. He's not like part mole. He is just part of a group of people that all live underneath New York City. So he takes Emma to the library, and when she gets there, she goes in, she gets some books, and she's about to leave when she hears a key open, so she has to go hide. She hides in the bathroom. She avoids detection, but as she's leaving, you hear Apollo. Apollo, when he went to the library to where Emma worked and like tried to hold up the library to say like, where is she? You know where she is. Obviously no one there knew where she was, but Apollo was so desperate that he kind of did this. He didn't hurt anyone. And again, everyone in the library testified for him and like testified that they like empathize with him and like understand what he was going through after this incident. But this incident still happened while Emma was there. So now Emma has to escape. But the incident caused the police to come and they pull up. They see Emma running and they pursue her and they're like, oh no, big chase. Emma's running, running, running. Somehow she stays in front of the police, even though she has a like sack, like a duffel bag almost full of books, which must weigh a lot. I don't know how she's able to outrun the police with that sack of books. She's running, 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 goes into a like subway station, jumps onto the tracks, runs, and she's able to stay in front of the police, goes into one of the side tunnels. That is where Wheels is. She jumps on, Wheels gets going, and his slow like electric scooter moves forward, but apparently moves faster than these police can run, so she's able to escape. And again, this was another one of those like manufactured crises that happened that was silly because you had this like big pursuit that essentially didn't go anywhere. She was able to outrun the police, jumped on Wheels' bike, took off, no consequences, nothing further. Again, it just felt like something that was like there to manufacture some drama. But I did like Wheels, and I did like Wheels's like underground location. He takes her back to the like, I don't know, I'll call it the New York Underground, and it is beautiful. There's all these like Christmas lights up to give it light. It is very bright and vibrant and very different from what we normally have seen in the Changeling. So it was a fun kind of change of pace as well. And she's talking to Wheels about her plan. She shows him the map of the Norwegian maples. When she was in the library, she printed up a map of all the Norwegian maples that are in New York. And Wheels is like, well, you're looking for a Norwegian maple. Why don't you start in Little Norway? And she's like, what? And he's like, yeah, this area. And it was like Queens and somewhere else. It used to be called Little Norway. So that seems like a good place to start. So now Emma has a tree that she's looking for and a location to start. She decides to go check that out. So, but before that, she heads back to the island. She drops off the books that she stole from the library and seems like she's about to leave the island. She tells her friend, like, hey, if I find Brian, I'll send a message, but either way, you won't see me again. And her friend understands. They say goodbye. And then as she's about to leave, Cal says goodbye. Cal comes as she's about to like head out to New York. And Cal says like she'll send someone to get the boat. Emma gives Cal a message to give to either Brian or Apollo, whoever comes to find her. And then she says like that she still doesn't forgive Cal, that Cal like left her drugged her for a while, kept her like cost her precious time to search for Brian, and that she doesn't forgive Cal. I bought you rest and a mind to think clearly. There are always two ways to see things. And I love that line. I really liked it. It is a wonderful kind of like jabbing of wits, but also it is an interesting kind of statement. Like, yes, there's always two ways to look at something. In Emma's mind, Cal drugged her and cost her a bunch of precious time. But in Cal's mind, look, she gave her rest that she needed. She gave her like a clear mind. And because of that, she was able to find this place to start looking. So I really like that line. I thought that was a really clever piece of writing. There's clever writing throughout the Changeling, but that was a line that I really, really loved. Now, Emma, considers this, but then starts rowing away, takes off on her trip, takes off on her journey to go to New York to figure out where Brian is. And as she's rowing away, like this blue light surrounds her. It is strange. I hope we find out more about what that means later, but it also looks very silly. It looks like clearly CG when she's doing it. And as she's rowing, she looks at the camera and says, "Mommy's coming for you." So Emma is heading to New York to figure out where Brian is, and that is the Changeling season 1, episode 6. Like I said, I didn't love this as much as the previous episodes. It still had a lot going for it. It had some really good revelations. I love the new character and location, and it has some really good writing. But overall, I think this is weaker than the previous episodes of Changeling. But look, if you've made it this far, you're going to keep watching because it seems like this is setting up for something really big to happen in the last 2 episodes of this season. So definitely check this out and get up to. And if you haven't gotten on the Changeling train, get up to date now because there are 2 episodes left, and I imagine they'll both be really good. So thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.